In 2007, my mother was not feeling well. And when she was sitting around the house, she was dabbling in trying to find cousins that she definitely lost contact with a very long time ago. And these cousins that she was looking for had changed their names. And she was having a heck of a time trying to find them, and she was not successful. And because she was sick and I felt compassion for her, I asked her, because I do title search work as a vocation, why don't you let me give it a try? I'm just going to ask you a few questions and go from there. And who knows, maybe I can help you, find these people. So she pointed me toward her cousin, Lenny Guggenheim. And Lenny talked to her father, who's Leo Mandelbaum, the daughter of Mary Tannenbaum. And he had dementia at the time, but he came up with around 8 names of brothers and sisters of my grandfather. So I'm starting to realize that he has a bigger family than I ever imagined. So then when I started to find some of Shea Tannenbaum's writings on the internet, I was finding out that he either had 13 brothers and sisters or 11 brothers and sisters, depending on where I read this. And I said to my mother, I said, Mom, we have to have a whole lot of people out there if he's got that many brothers and sisters. And sure enough, there were. So who did I start with? I started with some of my mother's missing people. They went from Sarnowski to Masalski because they were, her mother had 2 sisters, and so when the sisters got married, of course, they changed their name. One of them changed their name from Sarnowski to Lefkowitz. The other changed her name from Sarnowski to Masalski. And some of the Masalskis changed their name to Marshall. And I sort of quickly found the Marshalls in Utica. And one of them's in New Jersey. And Tommy Marshall in New Jersey didn't want to get in touch with my mother. There were several people in this search that didn't want to reconnect. And they each have their own reasons and their own stories that are bitter and unpleasant. And they don't want to reconnect. And there was nothing in my warm heart that could get them to want to do this, because I never knew them, and I'm not a part of any sadness or misfortune that had befallen them. And I was trying to include them, but some of them didn't want to be included. So the Masalskis in Utica, the Marshalls in Utica, I could contact them, and so now they're a branch of the family that are acquaintances now. And after that, my mother, well, we already knew about the Mandelbaums. Mary Tannenbaum married Ozer Mandelbaum and moved to this country, and their descendants were known to us. But Leo Mandelbaum, one of the daughters of Mary, had a brother, and his name was Morris. And no one wanted to find Morris or his descendants, because Morris was murdered in a gambling murder that happened in Las Vegas, Nevada. And so Leo would never speak about his brother, didn't want to find his brother, didn't want to talk about his brother. And this happened in the 60s. So I always wondered, where his children were, because they're my cousins too. Well, I didn't get to find them until after my mother died. But that was like really on the back burner. That was a big mystery. Another mystery was another one of my grandfather's brothers was the second from the youngest. His name his birth name was Shloime, or Shloime, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Solomon, Sam, they called him Sam sometimes. They called him Solomon other times. They called him Pincus other times. It's very confusing, but I know from I got to know instinctually or from the sequence of events or whatever that was him. Well, he didn't want to be an adult member of the Tannenbaum family, so he changed his name completely and his identity, and he became Pierre Tannenbaum. And he even spoke with a French accent, which he learned in Belgium, I don't know. And he dressed really fine, and he kept it a secret from his wife and his children that they are descendants of the Tannenbaum line. He was very embarrassed about his Judaism. He was very embarrassed about being a Tannenbaum. He didn't want any of the relatives to visit him directly at his home. Well, I was looking for Pierre Tannenbaum, or what happened to him, and my mother thought that he might have had a couple of children, and I was searching for the children and I couldn't find them. So what I did on Ancestry.com is I had an idea. I said, maybe Pierre Tannenbaum had a son and named him after himself. And that would be Peter. And I was correct. He had a son named Peter Tannenbaum. And so Peter Tannenbaum is on Ancestry.com with 2 addresses, one in Vermont and one in Saratoga. I wrote to both of them. Didn't know it was the same guy. I thought there were 2. It's the same guy. He has a home in Vermont and a home in Saratoga. Well, I got to speak to him for about half a minute before he was on the phone the rest of the day with my mother. He was flabbergasted that I found him and that his family's really Jewish and that his father portrayed himself as a completely different man. He had no idea. And his sister, Patricia Tannenbaum, lives in New York City. So I got in touch with her. And she lives near what's called the YIVO Institute. So she was flabbergasted, and I think they took it pretty hard, actually. I'm not sure that they enjoyed this knowledge very much. But Peter's okay with me. My mother called me and said, we were never supposed to tell, we were sworn to secrecy. She was really upset. And I said, Mom, no one ever swore me to secrecy. I didn't break any word, This is the cat's out of the bag. Okay, so Peter wants to meet my mother. Patricia wants to meet my mother. The Marshalls in Utica want to meet my mother. So I set up a rendezvous party that was supposed to happen in Albany. And now she was really sick. She had a lot of stuff going on. She had costus chondritis, which is some kind of ailment of the chest cavity, an inflamed chest cavity that there's no cure for it. It has to just go away on its own. And along with that, she got pneumonia and bronchitis. And so every time she coughed, it just aggravated it. And she was going from the couch to the bed, to the couch to the bed. She wasn't well. And a week before this party is supposed to take place, where she's going to meet the Marshalls from Utica, and she's going to meet the Tannenbaums and Patricia Tannenbaum Lutz, she falls in her kitchen and she breaks her hip, and it gets infected, and she's no good anymore. She's not gonna make it. And she was like looking forward to it. This was like the only thing that was really keeping her excited, to live and everything. So the rendezvous didn't happen.
Just to go back to finding the family members, what was that like for you to reconnect with these cousins?
Oh, it was so exciting. It was so exciting. I thought we had a really tiny family. I thought that my mother was an only child and that my father had one sister And I had 2 first cousins from my father's sister, and I had 2 brothers, and that was it. I thought it was the tiniest family ever. My grandmother and grandfather on my mother's side had died. My grandmother and grandfather on my father's side we knew and saw them several times a year. And that was it. And I felt pretty alone in this world because I only had the 2 cousins. They lived in Canada. We hardly ever saw them as adults. And then when I started finding these people, I was so surprised at how much bigger our family was and how much of an exploratory journey it is finding them and getting to know them and trying to figure out who's into it and who's not, and trying to be okay with who's not, even though it still surprises me that you wouldn't want to know. And then it's also such a joy when they do. So that's what it's like. But I had found out in my searching that Shea Tannenbaum, the youngest son, was a writer. And he lived in New City. He never got married. He never had any kids. The love of his life was writing. And so I looked all over the internet and collected all of his books, 27 of them that I know of. I found his bibliography with the Library of Congress or something, and that's how I found all the books. And didn't know how to read Hebrew or Yiddish except for my bat mitzvah. But my bat mitzvah taught me the alphabet. And so when I got these books, I found out that a lot of it were family stories. They're all written in short stories, and there were stories about family members. And so I got inspired to try to translate. And it was very hard